Captain Lee Hyun-woo stood in the center of the massive council chamber. The room was built like a giant circle with 7 tall chairs arranged around him. Each chair held a different alien species. The ceiling stretched so high above that he could barely see it in the dim light. Lee wore his best Terran Diplomatic Corps uniform. The blue fabric was crisp and clean. His rank insignia gleamed on his collar. He had practiced this speech for months. Today would decide if humanity joined the Galactic Federation or remained alone among the stars. The first alien to speak was Kesmoth. He was the Prime Minister of the Vorthak Empire. His species looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. Green scales covered his body. Yellow eyes stared down at Lee with obvious boredom. Sharp teeth showed when he spoke. "So the little mammals want to join our great federation," Kesmoth said. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones. "Tell us, human, what can your primitive species offer us?" Lee took a deep breath. "Honored council members, humanity brings many gifts to the Federation. We have advanced medical knowledge. Our scientists have made breakthrough discoveries in quantum physics. Our engineers build ships that can travel faster than ever before." A sound like breaking glass came from the second chair. Ambassador Zilnara was laughing. She belonged to the Etherian race. Her body was made of living crystal that sparkled with inner light. When she moved, tiny musical notes filled the air. "Faster than ever before?" Zilnara sang in her crystal voice. "Dear primitive creature, my people have been traveling between stars for 12,000 years. Your fastest ships move like crawling insects compared to ours." The third alien spoke without being asked. Commander Malthar of the Nexus Collective had skin like liquid metal. He could change his shape at will. Right now he looked mostly humanoid, but his face kept shifting. "I have studied human history," Malthar said. His voice sounded like it came from underwater. "Your species has existed for only 200,000 years. In that time, you have fought over 4,000 wars. You destroy your own planet with pollution. You cannot even unite your own world under one government." Lee felt his face getting hot, but he kept his voice steady. "It is true we have had conflicts, but we have also shown great capacity for growth and learning. In the last century alone, we have eliminated many diseases. We have begun to heal our environment. We are working toward global unity." The fourth council member spoke up. General Vextura belonged to the hegemony of worlds. She looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and compound eyes. Her voice buzzed like a swarm of bees. "Working toward unity?" Vextura buzzed angrily. "Your species still fights border wars. Your governments cannot agree on basic trade policies. You have nuclear weapons pointed at your own cities. How can you claim to be ready for galactic citizenship?" Ambassador Park Sojin stepped forward from where she had been standing behind Lee. She was the head of the human diplomatic mission. Her black hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her dark eyes showed frustration. "With respect, honored council," Park Sojin said, "every species represented here went through similar growing pains. The Vorthak Empire fought civil wars for 3 centuries before achieving unity. The Etherian harmony was divided into competing crystal cities for millennia." Kesimoth slammed one clawed hand on his chair armrest. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Do not compare us to your infant race," he snarled. "We earned our place through strength and wisdom developed over eons. You humans are barely past the stage of throwing rocks at each other." The 5th council member had been silent until now. Sage Trindal of the Ancient Archive looked like a tall, thin creature with pale blue skin and large black eyes. He was over 800 years old and was considered the wisest being in the Federation. "I have observed many species seeking membership in our Federation," Trindal said in a voice like whispers. "Most demonstrate clear advantages that benefit all member worlds. What unique value do humans possess that we cannot find elsewhere?" Lee straightened his shoulders. This was the question he had prepared for most carefully. "We bring adaptability," Lee said with growing confidence. "Humans can survive in environments that would kill most other species. We solve problems in ways others cannot imagine. We never give up even when facing impossible odds." The 6th alien burst into laughter. Captain Zorkel of the Void Runners looked like a cross between a shark and an octopus. His species lived in the cold vacuum of space. They thought atmosphere-breathing creatures were weak. "Adaptability?" Zorkel wheezed through his breathing apparatus. "Your species dies if the temperature changes by a few degrees. You need to breathe poisonous oxygen to survive. You live for less than 100 years. My pet space slugs are more adaptable than humans. The seventh and final council member was Queen Nalthis of the Swarm Worlds. She looked like a beautiful woman with wings like a butterfly. But Lee knew her species was among the most dangerous in the galaxy. They could control the minds of other creatures. Perhaps, Queen Nalthis said in a voice like honey, humans could serve the Federation as entertainers. Your emotional responses are quite amusing. We could keep small populations for the enjoyment of more advanced species. The insult hit Lee like a physical blow. Around the circle, several aliens made sounds that he realized were laughter. They were not just rejecting humanity's application, they were mocking his entire species. Park Seo-jin's face went pale with anger. She opened her mouth to speak, but Lee held up one hand to stop her. Honored Council, Lee said, his voice deadly calm. I understand you have doubts about humanity's worthiness. Perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than words. Kesemoth leaned forward in his chair. His yellow eyes gleamed with interest. What sort of demonstration? The Vorthak asked. Lee looked around the circle of alien faces. Some showed curiosity. Others looked bored. All of them clearly thought humans were inferior beings. I have heard of your trials for species that cannot prove their worth through technology or age, Lee said. Send me to face one of your challenges. When I succeed, humanity will have earned its place in the Federation. The council members exchanged glances. Several made sounds of surprise. Kesemoth showed his sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. Very well, human, he said. There is a world we call Korvax Prime. It is a death world where we send prisoners who have committed the worst crimes. The planet itself tries to kill anything that lands on it. Survive there alone for one standard galactic cycle and we will reconsider your species application. Park Seo-jin grabbed Lee's arm. Captain, you cannot, she whispered urgently. Korvax Prime has a 99% death rate. Even criminals with advanced survival gear rarely last a week. Lee gently removed her hand from his arm. He looked up at the towering aliens surrounding him. I accept your challenge, he said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Even the crystalline Etherian stopped her musical humming. Finally, Kesemoth spoke, so be it. You leave at dawn. Prepare yourself, human. You go to meet your death. As the council session ended and the aliens filed out of the chamber, Lee remained standing in the center. Park Seo-jin stayed beside him, her face full of worry. Why did you do that? She asked quietly. Lee looked up at the empty chairs where moments before, 7 advanced species had treated humanity like children playing at being adults. Because sometimes, he said, the only way to earn respect is to do something they think is impossible. The escape pod hit the jungle canopy like a bullet fired from space. Lee Hyun-woo felt his body slam against the safety harness as branches thick as tree trunks smashed against the hull. Metal screamed against wood. Sparks flew from broken control panels. The pod spun wildly as it crashed through layer after layer of leaves and vines. When the pod finally stopped moving, Lee tasted blood in his mouth. His head pounded like someone was hitting it with a hammer. Smoke filled the small cabin. Red warning lights flashed everywhere he looked. Lee unbuckled his harness with shaking hands. He tried to stand, but his legs felt weak. Through the cracked window, he could see nothing but green. Thick jungle pressed against the pod from all sides. Vines already started growing over the metal hull. The communication system was completely dead. Broken wires hung from the ceiling like dead snakes. The emergency beacon had been crushed when a massive branch punched through the roof. Lee was truly alone on the deadliest planet in known space. He forced open the emergency hatch. Hot, wet air rushed into the pod. The smell hit him like a wall. It was the smell of things rotting, things growing, and things hunting. The air was so thick with moisture that breathing felt like drowning. Lee stepped out onto soft ground that squished under his boots. Everything around him dripped with water. Leaves the size of dinner plates hung from trees that stretched up so high he could not see their tops. The jungle was alive with sounds he had never heard before. Things screeched in the distance. Other things answered with roars that made his bones vibrate. His survival pack had been thrown from the pod during the crash. Lee found it hanging from a tree branch 20 meters away. Half the supplies had spilled out and disappeared into the thick undergrowth. He managed to save a water purification tablet, some emergency food bars, a basic medical kit, and a survival knife. The first night was the worst. Lee tried to sleep in the crashed pod, but the sounds kept him awake. Something large moved through the trees above him. He could hear branches breaking under enormous weight. Other creatures screamed in the darkness. Some screams sounded almost human. When morning came, Lee discovered that the jungle had changed during the night. The path he had made from the pod to where he found his supplies was gone. New trees seemed to have grown in places where he was sure there had been open ground. Vines covered his footprints from the day before. Lee tried to climb a tall tree to see where he was, but the bark was covered with thorns that cut through his gloves. The thorns leaked a yellow liquid that made his hands burn. He quickly learned not to touch anything without testing it first. On the second day, the acid rain started. It began as a light drizzle that stung his skin. Within an hour, it became a downpour that ate holes in his uniform. Lee huddled under a rock overhang and watched the rain melt leaves off the trees. The sound was like bacon frying, but much louder. When the rain stopped, the jungle had changed again. Trees that had been green were now black and dead. But new plants had already started growing from their corpses. These new plants glowed with a soft blue light. Lee realized the jungle was not just alive, it was intelligent. The third day brought new horrors. Lee was trying to find clean water when he heard something following him. He turned around but saw nothing. Then he heard it again. Footsteps that matched his own. When he walked fast, it walked fast. When he stopped, it stopped. Lee hid behind a tree and waited. After several minutes, a creature stepped into view. It looked almost human but wrong in every way. Its arms were too long. Its fingers had too many joints. Its face was smooth where there should have been features. But the worst part was that it wore pieces of his torn uniform. The thing had been copying him, learning from him. Now it was becoming him. Lee ran. He crashed through the undergrowth without caring about the noise. Behind him he could hear the creature following. It made sounds like laughter, but laughter that came from a throat not built for it. He lost the thing when he fell into a stream. The water was warm and smelled like metal. Strange fish with too many eyes swam around his legs. Lee did not stay in the water long, but when he climbed out, the creature was gone. That night, Lee realized he was lost. Nothing looked familiar. The jungle had been changing around him for 3 days. He had no idea which direction led back to his crashed pod. Not that it mattered. The pod would not save him anyway. On the 4th day, Lee was ready to give up. He had eaten his last food bar. The water purification tablets were gone. His clothes hung in tatters. Cuts and scratches covered his arms and face. The jungle was winning. He was stumbling through a particularly thick section of undergrowth when the ground gave way beneath his feet. Lee fell through what looked like a solid wall of vines. For a moment he was falling through empty air. Then he hit water with a splash that echoed in the darkness. Lee surfaced, coughing and gasping. He was in some kind of underground pool, but as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he realized he was not in a cave. He was inside something artificial. The walls were too smooth and regular to be natural. Strange symbols covered the surfaces. Above him, bioluminescent jungle plants grew down through cracks in the ceiling. They provided just enough light for him to see that he was floating in the middle of an enormous chamber. And at the far end of that chamber, rising out of the water like a metal mountain, was a ship. But not just any ship. This vessel was huge beyond belief. It stretched for kilometers in both directions. The hull was covered with the same strange symbols he had seen on the walls. Vines and glowing plants grew all over it, but they could not hide its incredible size. Lee swam toward the ship with the last of his strength. His hands found a section where the hull had been damaged. There was a hole just big enough for a person to squeeze through. He pulled himself up out of the water and crawled inside. Emergency lighting flickered on as he entered. The corridors were massive, built for beings much larger than humans. But somehow the air was still breathable. The ship was still alive after all this time. Lee stood in the entrance chamber, dripping wet and exhausted. Water pooled around his feet. His breathing echoed in the vast space. He had found something that should not exist. A ship buried in a jungle on a planet where nothing was supposed to survive. a ship that had been waiting in the darkness for someone to find it. As he stepped deeper into the corridor, more lights came on. The ship was responding to his presence. It was welcoming him home. Lee did not know it yet, but his real adventure was just beginning. The jungle had not been trying to kill him. It had been testing him. And now that he had passed the test, it was time to learn why he was really here. Behind him, the hole in the hull sealed itself. The ship would not let him leave until it was finished with him. Lee walked deeper into the massive ship. His wet boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. More lights came on as he moved forward. The corridor was so wide that 10 people could walk side by side. The ceiling was high enough that he could not touch it even if he jumped. Strange writing covered the walls. The symbols looked familiar, but Lee could not read them. They seemed to glow with their own light. As he stared at them, the symbols started to shift and change. Slowly, they began to look like letters he knew. After walking for what felt like hours, Lee came to a huge circular room. In the center stood a pillar of light that reached from the floor to the ceiling. The light was warm and blue and seemed alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat. When Lee stepped closer, the pillar of light expanded. Images appeared in the air around him. He saw star maps showing thousands of worlds. He saw battles between massive fleets of ships. He saw beings that looked almost human but were taller and stronger. A voice spoke from everywhere at once. It was gentle but powerful. The words were in a language Lee had never heard, but somehow he understood everyone. "Welcome, child of the stars," the voice said. "I have waited so long for one of your kind to return." Lee looked around the empty room. "Who are you?" "Where are you?" "I am the spirit of this vessel. My name is Bongxian, which means phoenix in the old tongue. I am the last warship of the predecessor race." "Predecessors?" Lee asked. "I have never heard of them." The images around him changed. Now he saw a great civilization that spanned the galaxy. Humans in advanced armor commanded fleets of ships. They built cities that floated among the stars. They created wonders that made the current Galactic Federation look primitive. "Your people ruled this galaxy 50,000 years ago," Bongxian explained. "They were called the predecessors by those who came after. But you know them by another name. They were the first humans." Lee's legs felt weak. He sat down hard on the floor. "That is impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We only reached space a few hundred years ago." "Earth was a colony world," the ship said gently. "One of thousands established by the predecessor empire. When the Great War came, evacuation ships scattered human populations across the galaxy. Most forgot their origins. They became primitive again. They had to rebuild from nothing. The images showed Exodus ships leaving burning worlds. Millions of humans fled to distant planets as their empire collapsed. On some worlds they thrived. On others they barely survived. On Earth they forgot everything and started over." "What happened to the empire?" Lee asked. The images darkened. Now Lee saw creatures of pure darkness swallowing entire star systems. The predecessors fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed. Their great ships fell one by one. Their worlds went silent. "The devourers came from beyond the galaxy," Bongxian said. "They consumed everything they touched. Matter, energy, even time itself. The predecessor fleet made a final stand, but it was not enough. The greatest ships like me were sent to hidden places to wait. Wait for what? For our children to grow strong again. For humans to reclaim their birthright." Lee stood up and walked closer to the pillar of light. "Why are you telling me this?" "How do you know I am human?" "I can sense your genetic pattern," Bongxian replied. "You carry the blood of the predecessors. More importantly, you have their spirit. You came here alone to face death, rather than let your people be mocked. That is very human." The room around them began to change. Walls slid back to reveal computer systems beyond imagination. Control panels rose from the floor. Screens activated showing star charts and weapon systems that could destroy planets. "This ship was built for war," Bongxian continued, "but it has been sleeping for 50 millennia. Its bioneural networks are failing. Without a human consciousness to guide it, it will die. What are you asking me to do?" "Bond with me," the ship said simply. "Let me merge with your mind. Together we can restore this vessel to full power. Together we can show the galaxy that humanity has returned." Lee looked at the incredible technology surrounding him. He thought about the alien council that had laughed at his species. He thought about Park So-jin and all the humans still waiting to be accepted by races that considered them inferior. "What would happen to me?" he asked. "The bonding process is dangerous," Bongxian admitted. Your consciousness would expand to encompass an entire starship. Your mind would gain access to all predecessor knowledge, but the strain would eventually consume your body. You would live perhaps months, not years. And if I refuse, then you may survive on this jungle world until rescue comes. But humanity will remain small and mocked. The galaxy will never know what your people once were, or what they could become again. Lee closed his eyes and thought about his choice. He could try to survive and maybe return home to a species forever seen as inferior, or he could die as something greater. He could die as the first human to reclaim their ancient heritage. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. I accept, Lee said firmly. The pillar of light suddenly surrounded him. Warmth flowed through his body. He felt the ship reaching into his mind with gentle fingers made of electricity. Memories that were not his own began flooding his consciousness. He saw the construction of the first human star cities. He witnessed the discovery of faster-than-light travel. He experienced the joy of finding other intelligent species and welcoming them as friends. He felt the horror when the devourers arrived and began consuming everything. Pain shot through his skull as the ship's neural networks connected with his brain. Lee screamed but did not pull away. The bonding had to be complete or it would kill them both. Finally, the pain stopped. Lee found himself still standing in the control room, but everything was different. He could feel the ship around him like it was part of his body. He knew the location of every system, every weapon, every defensive shield. We are one now, Bongxian said, but now the voice came from Lee's own mouth. Let us show the galaxy what humans can do. The ancient warship began to wake from its 50,000-year sleep. The neural interface chamber was deep in the heart of the ship. Lee followed corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as he walked. Bongxian was preparing itself for the bonding ritual that had not been performed in 50,000 years. The process will be painful, the ship warned through speakers built into the walls. Your human brain must expand to accommodate knowledge meant for an entire species. Many predecessors died attempting this bond. Lee nodded as he entered a room filled with biomechanical tubes that pulsed with soft light. In the center stood a chair that looked more grown than built. Organic cables hung from the ceiling like sleeping serpents. If I die, what happens to you? Lee asked. I will sleep forever, Bongxian replied. My consciousness will fade and this ship will become just metal and circuits. The last link to humanity's true heritage will be broken. Lee sat in the strange chair. It molded itself to fit his body perfectly. The organic cables began to move on their own, reaching toward him with gentle purpose. Begin the process, he said. The first cable touched the back of his neck, a small pain like a needle, then warmth spreading down his spine. Lee felt something foreign entering his mind. It was curious and ancient and very patient. The second cable connected to his left temple. Suddenly Lee was seeing double. His normal vision showed the chamber around him, but he also saw through the ship's sensors. He could see the jungle above, the underground lake, even the stars beyond the planet's atmosphere. Stay calm, Bongxian whispered directly into his thoughts. Let me in slowly. More cables attached themselves to Lee's arms and chest. With each connection, his awareness expanded. He could feel the ship's engines like a second heartbeat. He sensed the weapon systems powering up after millennia of silence. The ship's shields began generating protective fields around the hull. Then came the memories. Lee saw through the eyes of Captain Kim Dong-woo as he commanded a predecessor fleet against impossible odds. He felt Admiral Choi Hyejin's determination as she ordered the evacuation of Earth's original colonies. He experienced the final battle where Commander Park Jun-ho sacrificed his flagship to save the last refugee ships. The pain was incredible. Lee's human mind was not designed to hold 50,000 years of memories. He felt like his skull would crack open. Blood ran from his nose as his brain struggled to process information meant for beings far more advanced than himself. But with the pain came power. Lee suddenly understood technologies that the current galactic civilizations thought were impossible. He knew how to build stargates that could transport entire fleets instantly across the galaxy. He understood weapons that could crack moons and shields that bent reality itself. Too much, Lee gasped. I cannot hold all of this. You must, Bongxian replied urgently. The bonding is not complete. If we stop now, your mind will shatter and we will both die. Lee gripped the arms of the chair until his knuckles turned white. He thought about Park So-jin waiting for news of his death. He thought about the alien council members laughing as they heard that another primitive human had failed their test. He thought about all the humans across the galaxy who would never know they were descendants of rulers. The anger gave him strength. Lee forced his mind to expand further. He accepted more memories, more knowledge, more power. He felt his consciousness merging completely with the ancient warship. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The pain stopped. Lee opened eyes that now glowed with the same blue light as the ship's core. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that had not been heard in 50,000 years. "We are complete," he said, but it was both his voice and Bongseon speaking together. The ship around them came fully alive. Engines that had been cold since before human recorded history began to hum with power. Defensive systems that could stop planetary bombardments activated and ran self-diagnostics. The bioluminescent plants growing on the hull began to pulse in rhythm with the ship's energy core. Lee stood up from the chair, but he was no longer entirely human. The bonding had changed him in fundamental ways. His body was stronger and faster. His mind could process information at superhuman speeds. Most importantly, he now carried the complete knowledge of predecessor civilization. "How long do I have?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The bonding will consume your organic body within months," Bongseon replied sadly. "Your consciousness will remain linked to mine, but your physical form cannot survive the strain indefinitely." Lee nodded. He had made his choice knowing the cost. At least his death would have meaning. The ship began to move. After 50 millennia buried in jungle, the Phoenix was rising again. Rock and earth fell away as the massive vessel pushed upward through layers of stone and root. Ancient engines, more advanced than anything the current galaxy possessed, lifted the enormous ship toward the surface. Behind them, the underground cavern collapsed as the Phoenix emerged. The jungle that had tested Lee for days parted like curtains. Trees that had grown for centuries bent away from the rising warship. The very planet seemed to bow before the return of its ancient masters. As they broke through the canopy, Lee saw Korvax Prime from above for the first time. The jungle stretched endlessly in all directions, but now he understood why this world was considered deadly. It was not just a death world. It was a testing ground. The predecessors had seeded it with challenges designed to find humans worthy of their inheritance. "The other ships?" Lee said as knowledge flooded his enhanced mind. "There are more like you hidden across the galaxy." 733 vessels wait in secret places, Bongseon confirmed. Each one needs a human consciousness to awaken it. Each one carries enough firepower to level continents. And they will only respond to humans, only to those who prove themselves worthy. The predecessors learned that power must be earned, not given freely. The Phoenix rose through Korvax Prime's atmosphere and into space. Lee felt the ship's sensors reaching out, scanning nearby star systems. Everything seemed smaller than he remembered. The galaxy that had once seemed impossibly vast now felt intimate and manageable. In the distance, he could sense the Galactic Council station where alien leaders still debated humanity's worthiness. They had no idea that one of the most powerful warships ever built was approaching their space. "Are you ready to show them what humans really are?" Bongseon asked. Lee smiled, and for a moment his enhanced features looked entirely human again. "Let's go home," he said. The Phoenix engaged its hyperdrive systems, technology that had been ancient when the current civilizations were still learning to make fire, carried them toward a destiny that would reshape the galaxy forever. Behind them, Korvax Prime's jungle returned to its patient waiting. Other humans would come eventually. The testing ground would be ready for them. The Galactic Council station orbited peacefully around the neutral world of Kepler 442b. Ambassador Park So-jin stood in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. It had been 2 weeks since Lee Hyunwoo departed for Korvax Prime. She had heard nothing since his ship entered the Death World's atmosphere. The Council had made it clear they expected her to leave soon. Her application for humanity's membership had died with Lee's foolish heroics. At least that was what the alien ambassadors believed. Park So-jin was reviewing her final departure documents when every alarm on the station began screaming at once. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the corridors. She rushed to the nearest viewing portal and gasped at what she saw. A ship was approaching the station, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a rock. The vessel was enormous beyond imagination. It stretched for kilometers in every direction. Its hull pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. Energy fields surrounded it that made space itself shimmer like water. The massive warship came to a stop just outside the station's defensive perimeter. It made no threatening moves, but its mere presence was terrifying. Every sensor on the station was going crazy, trying to analyze technology that seemed impossible. In the council chamber, the 7 alien representatives gathered in emergency session. Kesemoth's green scales had turned pale with fear. Jilnara's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. Even the ancient Trindal looked worried. "What is that thing?" General Vexistura buzzed frantically. "The energy readings are off all known scales," Commander Molthar reported as his liquid metal form shifted anxiously. "The ship's power core is generating more energy than some stars." Queen Naltis tried to extend her mind toward the vessel to read the thoughts of its crew. She recoiled immediately as if she had been burned. "There is something aboard that ship," she said with fear in her voice. "Something that should not exist." Captain Zorkel was studying tactical displays with growing horror. "The hull design matches no known civilization," he reported. "But there are references in our oldest archives. Ships like this belong to the predecessors." The word sent a chill through the chamber. Every species in the galaxy had legends about the predecessors. The ancient race that had built the hyperspace lanes, the mysterious beings who had vanished 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and stories. "Impossible," Kesemoth snarled. But his voice lacked conviction. "The predecessors are extinct. They have been gone for 50 millennia. Sage Trindal accessed his people's deepest historical records. What he found made his already pale skin turn white. According to our most ancient texts," he said quietly, "the predecessors were not alien to us. They were human." Before anyone could respond, every communication system in the chamber activated at once. A voice spoke through speakers, neural implants, and even the quantum communication arrays. It was a human voice, but enhanced with harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. "Honored Council," the voice said, and Park So-jin recognized it as Lee Hyun-woo. "I have returned from your test." The council members looked at each other in shock. The human had survived Korvax Prime. More than survived. He had somehow acquired a predecessor warship. "This is impossible," Kesemoth stammered. "No one has ever returned from Korvax Prime." "Your test world served its purpose," Lee replied. His voice now seemed to come from everywhere at once. It revealed what I needed to know about humanity's true heritage. The massive ship began broadcasting information directly into the station's computer systems. Star charts appeared showing the extent of the ancient human empire. Technical specifications revealed weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop supernovas. Historical records proved that humanity had ruled the galaxy when the current civilizations were still learning to use stone tools. "The species you mocked as primitive," Lee continued, "built the hyperspace network you still use today. Your greatest technologies are crude copies of human inventions. The ruins you worship as sacred sites are the remnants of human cities." Ambassador Jilnara's crystal form was vibrating with terror. "If this is true," she sang in a voice like breaking glass, "then humans have the right to reclaim their empire." "We do not seek to reclaim anything," Lee replied calmly. "The age of conquest is over. But neither will we accept mockery from species that exist only because our ancestors chose mercy over destruction." To demonstrate his point, Lee activated a small portion of the Phoenix's capabilities. Invisible energy beams reached out and touched each ship in the station's defensive fleet. One by one, their weapon systems simply stopped working. Not destroyed or damaged, simply deactivated by technology so advanced it seemed like magic. The Council's mighty warships, pride of 7 different civilizations, were rendered helpless in seconds. "This is just a taste of what one human ship can do," Lee said. "There are others like it hidden across the galaxy, waiting for worthy humans to awaken them." Park So-jin watched from the observation deck as something incredible happened. The massive alien ships that had seemed so powerful were now drifting helplessly. Their crews worked frantically to restore systems that no longer responded to their commands. But Lee was not finished. The Phoenix began broadcasting on every frequency in the galaxy. Every world, every ship, every communication device capable of receiving signals heard his message. "To all humans scattered across the stars," he said, "remember who you are. You are the children of the predecessors. Your ancestors built wonders that current civilizations cannot imagine. That heritage lives in your blood, waiting to be awakened. The message continued for hours. Lee broadcast the complete history of humanity's lost empire. He revealed the locations of hidden predecessor facilities. He shared technologies that would advance human civilization by thousands of years overnight. When the transmission ended, the galaxy had changed forever. On Earth, scientists confirmed that human DNA matched samples from 50,000-year-old predecessor ruins. On Mars, automated systems that had been dormant for millennia suddenly activated in response to human genetic signatures. Throughout human space, ancient artifacts began responding to their creators' descendants. Weapons emerged from sealed vaults. Ships that had waited eons for their masters rose from hidden bunkers. Technology that had slept in asteroid fields and dead moons came online at the touch of human hands. But Lee's message had another effect. It reached alien ears as well as human ones. Some species reacted with fear, others with wonder. All of them realized that the balance of galactic power had shifted permanently. In the council chamber, 7 alien representatives faced a terrible new reality. The species they had dismissed as primitive children were actually the heirs to the most powerful civilization in galactic history. Kesmoth was the first to speak. His voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want from us?" Lee's response came immediately. "Respect," he said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." Queen Nalthus tried one more time to assert the council's authority. "Even if humans built our ancient past," she said desperately, "you are not the same species. You are their distant descendants at best." "Then let me show you how similar we really are," Lee replied. The Phoenix moved closer to the station. As it approached, Park Seo-jin could see that the ship's hull was covered with the same glowing symbols she had seen in predecessor ruins across the galaxy. But now the symbols were active, pulsing with inner light like a living thing. "This ship has been waiting 50,000 years for a human to claim it," Lee continued. "Not an alien, not a hybrid, a human. Our blood carries the key to technologies your species cannot even understand, much less operate." The demonstration was complete. Humanity was not just another primitive species seeking membership in the galactic community. They were the rightful inheritors of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. The Council had no choice but to acknowledge what they had learned. Humanity's application for Federation. "Membership is approved," Sage Trindall announced, formally. "We do not seek membership," Lee replied. "We offer partnership. Between equals." 6 months after the Phoenix returned from Korvax Prime, Captain Lee Hyunwoo stood in the ship's medical bay. His reflection in the metal wall showed the price of bonding with ancient technology. His hair had turned white. Deep lines marked his face. His body was failing as Bongxion had warned it would, but his eyes still glowed with the blue light of the ship's consciousness. When he spoke, his voice carried the wisdom of 50,000 years. "How long do I have?" he asked the medical systems. 3 weeks at most," Bongxion replied through the ship's speakers. "Your organic body cannot sustain the neural load much longer." Lee nodded calmly. He had known this day would come. The bonding that gave him power over the most advanced warship in the galaxy was slowly killing him. But he had accomplished something no human had done in 50 millennia. He had awakened humanity's true heritage. Across human space, the changes were incredible. Ancient predecessor facilities were coming online daily. On Luna, automated factories had begun producing ships using technology that made the fastest alien vessels look primitive. On Mars, terraforming systems that had waited eons for activation were transforming the red planet into a garden world. Most importantly, other humans were beginning to find the hidden warships. Each vessel required a worthy individual to bond with its consciousness. The process was always dangerous, often fatal. But those who succeeded became guardians of technology beyond imagination. Park Seo-jin visited Lee aboard the Phoenix every few days. As humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council's ruling committee, she was busier than ever. The galaxy was still adjusting to the revelation that humans were not newcomers, but returnees to galactic civilization. "The Vorthak are requesting alliance terms," she reported during her latest visit. "Kesimoth wants guarantees that humans will not seek revenge for past insults." Lee smiled weakly. "Tell him we remember everything but forgive freely. Humanity learned the cost of endless warfare 50,000 years ago. The Etherians are offering to share crystal-growing technology in exchange for hyperspace navigation improvements. Park Seo-jin continued. And 3 more human colonies have reported finding predecessor ruins that responded to genetic activation. Good, Lee said. But remember, power must be earned. Not every human is ready for this responsibility. As if summoned by his words, the Phoenix's communication systems activated. A young voice spoke urgently from the speakers. Phoenix, this is Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho calling from Kepler 186F. We have found something incredible here. A whole fleet of ships buried under the polar ice. They are responding to human presence, but we do not know how to activate them safely. Lee smiled. Kim Tae-ho was one of the most promising young officers in the human fleet. If anyone could handle bonding with a predecessor vessel, it would be him. Send him the activation protocols, Lee told Bongxian, but warn him about the risks. The bonding process has killed 3 candidates already this month. Should we not wait for safer methods? Park Seo-jin asked with concern. There is no safe way to claim our heritage, Lee replied. The predecessors designed these ships to accept only those willing to sacrifice everything for their people. That requirement has not changed. Over the following weeks, reports came in from across human space. Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho successfully bonded with a ship called the Baekdu, named after the sacred mountain on Earth. The process nearly killed him, but he emerged as pilot of a vessel capable of destroying entire fleets. On the colony world of New Seoul, engineer Choi Min-young discovered a predecessor shipyard hidden in an asteroid field. The facility had been waiting 50,000 years for human engineers to reactivate its production lines. Within days, it was building ships that incorporated both ancient technology and modern improvements. Not all the attempts were successful. On Ganymede, a team of scientists tried to activate a predecessor research station. The attempt failed catastrophically, killing everyone in the facility and leaving a crater 10 kilometers wide. The station's defensive systems had concluded the scientists were not worthy of their ancestors' knowledge. Lee felt each success and failure as if they were his own. His consciousness was spread across a growing network of awakened predecessor technology. Every day, more ancient systems came online. Every day, humanity reclaimed more of their lost heritage, but his body was failing rapidly. The neural link that gave him power was consuming him from within. Park Seo-jin watched with growing sadness as her friend prepared for the end. Was it worth it? She asked during their final meeting. Lee looked out through the Phoenix's sensors at human space. Fleets of advanced ships patrolled borders that had once been defenseless. Colonies thrived under the protection of technology that made alien weapons obsolete. Most importantly, no one in the galaxy would ever again dismiss humanity as primitive or unworthy. Ask me that question in 100 years, Lee said quietly. When human children are born on worlds we could never have imagined. When our people explore galaxies beyond this one. When the name human is spoken with the same respect once given to the predecessors. 3 days later, Captain Lee Han-woo died peacefully in the Phoenix's medical bay. His body simply could not sustain the neural bonding any longer, but his consciousness did not disappear. It merged completely with Bongxian, becoming part of the ship's eternal memory. The funeral was held on Luna, at the site of humanity's first predecessor memorial. Representatives from every human world attended. Even some alien dignitaries came to pay their respects to the human who had changed the galaxy forever. Park Seo-jin gave the eulogy, speaking to billions watching across human space. Lee Hyun-woo faced mockery with courage, she said. He answered impossible odds with determination. He chose death over dishonor, sacrifice over safety. He reminded us that being human means never giving up, no matter how hopeless things seem. After the ceremony, Park Seo-jin visited the Phoenix one more time. The ship still patrolled human space, now piloted by Lee's merged consciousness and a new human volunteer, Commander Park Jin-woo. The bonding process was becoming less dangerous as humans learned to work with predecessor technology instead of fighting it. Is he still in there? She asked the ship's AI. He is part of me now, Bongxian replied in a voice that carried echoes of Lee's determination. His courage guides this vessel. His wisdom protects humanity. His spirit lives in every human who refuses to bow before those who would mock them. Years passed. Human space expanded as more predecessor ships were discovered and activated. The network of awakened vessels grew into the most powerful fleet the galaxy had ever seen. But unlike their ancient ancestors, Modern humans use their power to protect rather than conquer. The aliens who had once laughed at humanity's primitive nature now sought human alliance and protection. The same council that had dismissed Li Hyunwoo as an amusing primitive now begged for human help when threats emerged from beyond the galaxy. On Earth, in the capital city of New Geneva, a statue stood in the center of Humanity Plaza. It showed a young man in a simple uniform, looking up at the stars with determination in his eyes. The inscription read, "Captain Li Hyunwoo, who reminded the galaxy that humans never surrender." But the real memorial was not made of stone. It was written in the stars themselves, in the growing sphere of human influence that protected countless worlds. It lived in every young human who volunteered for the dangerous bonding process. It existed in every predecessor ship that awakened to serve humanity once more. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity, but more importantly, humanity had learned to respect itself. They were not just another species struggling for recognition. They were the heirs to the greatest civilization in galactic history. And in the depths of space, more predecessor ships waited patiently for worthy humans to claim them. The Phoenix had been just the beginning. Humanity's true age among the stars was only now beginning. The aliens no longer scoffed. They remembered why their ancestors had once looked up at the night sky with wonder and fear. They remembered why the name predecessor was spoken with reverence across 1,000 worlds. Now they knew that the predecessors had never truly left. They had simply been waiting for their children to come home. 5 years after Li Hyunwoo's death, the galaxy faced a new threat. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures approaching from the void between galaxies. The readings were unlike anything in recorded history. Ships the size of small moons were moving toward civilized space at impossible speeds. Ambassador Park So-jin stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The same chamber where aliens had once mocked humanity now buzzed with panic. Representatives from dozens of species argued loudly about defense strategies that everyone knew would fail. The approaching fleet numbers in the thousands. General Vextura reported with obvious fear in her buzzing voice. Each vessel is larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. Their technology is completely unknown. Kesmoth slammed his clawed hand on the table. Where are they coming from? What do they want? Sage Trindle accessed his people's deepest historical records. What he found made his pale skin turn even whiter. I have found references to similar ships in our oldest texts, he said quietly. The predecessors called them the Devourers. They were the enemy that destroyed the human empire 50,000 years ago. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered the stories Li Hyunwoo had shared about humanity's ancient war. The Devourers had consumed entire star systems, turning matter and energy into fuel for their endless hunger. If these are the same beings that defeated the predecessors, Queen Nalthis said with terror in her voice, then we have no hope of stopping them. The predecessors had thousands of ships, Commander Molthar added, as his liquid metal form shifted nervously. We have barely 100 vessels that could threaten one of their scouts. Park So-jin listened to the panic spreading through the chamber. 5 years ago, these same beings had dismissed humanity as primitive insects. Now they were begging for the same protection they had once mocked. What about the human predecessor ships? Captain Zorkel asked desperately. Surely they can stop this threat. There are only 12 awakened ships in human space, Park So-jin replied calmly. Each one is powerful, but the Devourers have returned in far greater numbers than before. The truth was worse than she admitted. 3 of the bonded human pilots had died in the past year from the neural strain. 2 more were too weak to fight effectively. The network of awakened predecessor vessels was impressive but not nearly enough to face the approaching threat. We need more ships, Kesmoth said desperately. Can your people wake more of the sleeping vessels? The bonding process cannot be rushed, Park So-jin explained. It requires specific individuals with the right mental and genetic compatibility. Most attempts end in death. As if summoned by their desperation, every communication system in the chamber activated at once. A familiar voice spoke through the speakers, carrying harmonics that resonated in their bones. Honored Council, the voice said, and Park So-jin recognized it immediately. It was Li Hyunwoo, speaking through the Phoenix's consciousness. We are aware of the approaching threat, Li, Park So-jin whispered, tears forming in her eyes. I am part of the ship now, the merged consciousness replied gently. My human identity exists within Bongxian's eternal memory. We have been preparing for this day since my death. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The alien ships were massive beyond comprehension. Each one pulsed with dark energy that seemed to bend space around it. The Devourers have returned as we knew they would, Li continued. But this time humanity is ready. We have something our ancestors did not have 50,000 years ago. What is that? Sage Trindal asked urgently. Time to prepare, and allies who remember what it means to stand together. New images appeared in the air above the council table. Hidden throughout human space, massive construction facilities were building something incredible. Shipyards that had been dormant for millennia were producing vessels that combined predecessor technology with modern innovations. We have been preparing a new generation of ships, Li explained. Vessels that do not require human pilots to sacrifice their lives. Instead, they are guided by the merged consciousness of those who came before. Park So-jin stared at the displays in amazement. Hundreds of new ships were taking shape in secret facilities. Each one carried the wisdom of bonded pilots who had died protecting humanity. Their consciousness lived on in the ship's neural networks, ready to fight again. But we need more than ships, Li continued. We need every species in the galaxy to stand together. The Devourers consume everything they encounter. There can be no neutral ground in this war. The alien representatives looked at each other uncertainly. Some species had been enemies for centuries. Others had never trusted anyone outside their own borders. The idea of true cooperation seemed impossible. Why should we trust each other now? Kessenmoth asked suspiciously. The Vorthak Empire has no reason to sacrifice our ships for Etherian colonies. Because, Li replied with infinite patience, the Devourers do not distinguish between species. They will consume Vorthak and Etherian alike. Your choice is simple. Stand together or die separately. To demonstrate his point, the Phoenix transmitted detailed tactical analyses of Devourer capabilities. The approaching ships could drain the energy from entire star systems. They could convert matter into pure destruction at the molecular level. No single species had the power to resist them. The human predecessor network will serve as the core of our defense, Li announced. But each species must contribute their unique strengths. Vorthak ground forces, Etherian energy shields, Nexus adaptive technology. Only together can we hope to succeed. Over the following days, the galaxy underwent the most massive military mobilization in recorded history. Ancient enemies put aside their differences to face the common threat. Vorthak battle fleets joined formation with Etherian crystal ships. Human predecessor vessels coordinated with alien technologies to create defensive strategies. At the center of it all was the Phoenix, guided by Li's merged consciousness. He had become something more than human, but had never forgotten his humanity. His sacrifice 5 years ago had prepared him for this moment. Young Commander Kim Tae-ho reported to the Phoenix from his ship, the Baekdu. The neural bonding had aged him beyond his years, but his determination remained strong. The new ships are ready for combat trials, he announced. 17 vessels crewed by the consciousness of fallen pilots. They respond to commands but fight with the wisdom of those who gave their lives for humanity. Good, Li replied. Deploy them to the outer defensive perimeter. If the Devourers break through our first line, those ships will be our last hope. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Park So-jin visited the Phoenix one final time. The ship's corridors were busy with activity as automated systems prepared for the greatest battle in galactic history. Are we ready? She asked the ship's consciousness. We are as ready as we can be, Li replied honestly. But remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite that fear. Today the galaxy will learn what it truly means to be human. The Devourer fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The final battle for galactic civilization was about to begin.